Hi there, gorgeous. Hope you're having a great day and that you're doing well. Today's video topic is a rather, I don't want to say new, but it's a newer kind of concept that I saw Kristen Dominique do recently, and Chloe Morello, I want to say, is the one who initially came out with this concept. So if you haven't seen her video, I'll have it linked for you below. But it's basically a way to look back and see where I was with my makeup style, application, method, etc. many years ago and comparing it today. So basically doing a side-by-side application. And it's not a way to bash myself. I know sometimes people see videos like this and they think you shouldn't really bash yourself like that. And I agree. We should love ourselves at all stages of our lives no matter what. And 7 years ago, that was not me. 7 years ago, I was so quick to bash myself and talk bad about myself. And I feel like I've come to a place now where I am loving myself and I'm accepting myself. And I'm not going to be critical and hard on myself because goodness knows there's so many people on this channel who will do it for me. I need to be my best friend. You know, it makes sense. You have to live with yourself. So you really need to learn how to love yourself. And that's what it's all about. I have been on YouTube since 2012. It's been a long time. You go back and you just can't believe that much time has passed. And when I watched Chloe's video and Kristen's video, they went back 5 years. I'm going to take it back a little bit further. I'm going to go back 7 years because I feel like that was the time when I was just learning how to do makeup, kind of finding my style. It wasn't until about, I feel, maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I really did develop my own unique method, style, way of doing it. I'm first applying an eyeshadow primer. I always applied an eyeshadow primer actually when I first started wearing makeup, and I found out that you could apply a primer and it would make your eyeshadow last longer. I thought, oh my gosh, that's so genius, especially having oily lids. I remember being so frustrated by eyeshadow in high school because it wouldn't last that long, and primers changed everything. I'm trying to think of how you're going to see this in the thumbnail. It's going to be before and after. Okay, so this side of my face will be how I did my makeup 7 years ago. This side of my face will be how I do it now. So one of the things I did not do in the beginning, this was something I learned a few years ago, is apply a eyeshadow that matches my complexion. So you know that about me by now if you've seen enough of my videos. I always apply Wet n Wild's Brulee on my eyes first, but I did not do that way back when. So we'll skip applying it on this side and only apply it on this side. And the reason that I do this is because it helps blending. I figured that out somewhere along the way, that applying a blending shade first helps your eyeshadow go on much more smoothly and it looks a lot more professional. And hopefully you'll be able to see the difference when I get to this eye a little bit later. The eyeshadow palette I'm going to use today is, maybe I should use a different one. So for my eyes today, we're gonna pay homage to an old palette. I haven't used this one in, I can't even tell you how long, but this was in one tutorial that I ran across on my channel that was from, I wanna say at least 6 or 7 years ago. The Lorac Unzipped palette. It's beautiful, but I never pick it up, I feel like. So I'm starting with a shade called Unconditional from this palette. Using the Sedona Lace EB09 brush, I'm going to apply that into the crease. And the way that I apply my crease color now is I make sure the brush. I also make a lot more flubs. Have you noticed that? I used to try and be so perfect way back when I first started, and I would be so cautious of mistakes and all that, and now I don't care. I'm human. I use a fluffier brush now to apply my eyeshadow in the crease, and I also bring it up much higher too, because I realized over time that my eyes are semi-hooded, and if I don't do that, then you can't see the eyeshadow in the crease. The other thing I do differently now too is I tend to stay away from this part of the eye. In other words, I don't bring my eyeshadow down as low, and you'll see, I'll recreate it over here so you can see the difference, but it would make my eyes look rather droopy. And when I first started, I didn't know I had droopy eyes. I had no clue, but it was over time that people started pointing it out to me, and I started learning about different eye shapes and etc. that I was like, oh, okay, well then I need to change how I do my eyeshadow so that it makes my eyes look lifted. And I also feel like concentrating more of it on the center of the crease really helps to make the eyes look more lifted too. And so I try to bring it up in the center a little bit more. Go back and blend the edges. And there's nothing on the brush. I'm simply relying on what I applied on my brow bone initially to help me blend in this part. And my preferred brush back in the day was the Sigma E45. This was the one that I used all the time for crease work. And what I liked about it is that it had a very dense brush, very concentrated, focused bristles, which allowed for a greater amount of color on application. But at the same time too, it does make it a little bit harder to blend. That's what I realized over time. So, and the way that I would always apply it is directly in the crease like this. And like I had said, I wouldn't bring it up that high, not like I did over here. And I would bring it down too, if I had it a little further down. And you'll see the difference at the end. I haven't done this side by side yet, but I went back and watched some of my older videos. You can definitely see a difference in how my eyes look much more downturned in my older videos compared to now. I mean, I would try to blend some of it up towards the brow, but I didn't emphasize it like I do now. And I'll take my blending brush, and at this point is when I would take my skin tone matching shade and blend out the edges. And I do feel like I've gotten a bit more fastidious about my blending too. I'm much more picky about it. And so back then it was a little less professional looking and a little bit more choppy. Not much. I mean, my blending was still pretty good back then, but it needed a little bit more practice to it. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Next shade I'm going to take from this palette is the one called Unreal. Nothing major really here. I mean, I think I still use the same brush that I used way back then, MAC 239. I know they've changed the way that they are now. From what I understand, the bristles are much longer because I have a MAC 239 that has some rather short bristles, and every time I use it, people ask me what it is, and then they go and look for it, and they say to me, well, they've changed the way the brush is because it doesn't look like that anymore. And I haven't bought one in so long because mine have held up so well. And that's really sad to know because it's such a great brush, and the shorter bristles I feel like is what made it so spectacular. Next shade I'm taking from this palette is going to be the one called Unbridled. It's that really deep brown at the end. Now this is going to be a really interesting application method because back then I was not skilled with outer V application at all. I really didn't understand it. I found it to be confusing, hard, and I would get so frustrated. I remember being so frustrated by applying eyeshadow in the outer V. Whereas now I feel like it's just second nature to me. So what I would have done would be apply a little bit on the outer corner to mimic that outer V application, but not really taking it any further than that. And if I did do my outer V, it was very defined. It didn't look as effortless as I feel like it does now. And over here, I'll do the same thing where I'll apply a little bit on the outer corner, but I'm not dragging it down. I'm applying it in a more lifted way. And then I'm going to go in with my, this brush is so loved. You can't even read the numbers on it anymore. E25, okay, Sigma E25 brush, taking more of that unbridled shade there. And this is my go-to brush for outer V work. And apply it directly in the outer V and begin to blend it into the outer crease. Really focusing on pulling the eye up and out, not dragging it down, and adding a little bit as I go. That was always something that I struggled with in the beginning too when I was learning how to apply eyeshadow on my eyes, was that I would apply more thinking more is better. And it really was hard to correct if you applied too much. And that was when I figured out if I only apply a small amount at a time and blend as I go, it makes for a much more professional looking application, and I can control it a little bit better. Something else I do now that often gets cut out of my videos just for time purposes is I'll go back with the shade that I used in the crease and I'll blend over the shade that I applied for the outer V work so that the two become seamless and you really can't see where one ends and one begins. When I first got into makeup, I was obsessed with liquid eyeliner. I used it in every look possible. I remember somebody, I don't know who, this was so long ago, asking me if I ever used anything other than black eyeliner because it was in all of my looks, and it's just because I loved it so much. So I'll go ahead and apply my black liquid eyeliner on this eye. This is the e.l.f. H2O proof eyeliner pen, and when I would apply it in a way where, again, it would emphasize the downturned nature of my eyes, so it would more or less droop down instead of lifting everything up like I do it now. If I ever do liquid eyeliner, I'm always careful to make sure it has a flick on the end or it has a wing so that it gives my eyes a more lifted appearance. And the line was very thin too. I didn't make it very thick. I just wanted to darken the lash line. Today though, I have gotten away from using liquid eyeliner. I still use it every now and then, don't get me wrong, I do. But on a everyday basis when I'm applying my makeup, I have gravitated more towards eyeshadow as eyeliner. I feel like it's softer, it's more natural, it's not as intense, and it gives the look a soft, smoky feel. Plus, it's a lot easier to do when you're applying your makeup with a toddler underneath you. Liquid eyeliner, yeah, not so much. It's hard to correct. So I'm going back with the shade Unbridled from the palette, and I'm using that on my MAC 263 brush here. I'm going to line the lash line. And I love a wing now. That's been my one thing that I love to do when I'm wearing eyeshadow liners. So I'll go ahead and add a small flick to the outer corner. Moving on to brows. My poor brows. I used to get so much hate on my brows and I could never understand why. And please remember this, if you're trying to give someone constructive criticism, there's a way to do it. So many people would hate on my brows and I could never understand why until someone who was rather kind came along and said, you know, it might be better if you did your brows this way because it does make your eyes look droopy. And I wish I would remember that person's name, but it was that comment that opened my eyes. And I was like, oh, well, let me see. Let me try that. Let me try what she's saying and see if it looks different. And it did. It really, I saw such a difference. But when you're just coming and you're saying, my gosh, your brows suck. Thank you. I can't really do anything with that. Yes, if you go back and you look at my older videos, you can tell that my eyebrows were more downturned. My eyebrows actually grow down. Like I have to tweeze them now to get them to stay up here so that my eyes look lifted. But if I just let them go naturally, my eyebrow would actually go down to about there. Yeah, so I'm using a powder here and I'll try to recreate that look so you can see what I was talking about. I'm using the Benefit Foolproof Brow Powder, and literally this is all that I would do. It sometimes wasn't a powder, it was just a Covergirl pencil. I remember it very distinctly that I used all the time. And I didn't try to do any brow hair like strokes in my brows. I simply filled in the brow, just what was growing there, the hairs only. I didn't try to add shape to it or anything else. And I went all the way down with it. Very 20s looking, because if you go back and you look at Clara Bow's eyebrows in the 20s, hers were like this too. On this other eye here, I'm going to use an e.l.f. eyebrow pencil. This is the Ultra Precise Brow Pencil in the shade Auburn, and I feel like I've gotten a little better at doing my brows now as opposed to how I did them initially. And the way that I do it is I'll just put small brow hair like strokes in the brow, and I do that specifically on the inner corner too. I don't really have hair here, so I have to fake it. I put more emphasis on the arch. The arch is more pointed usually, and I do make them a little thicker than the way that my hairs naturally grow. I'm going to use a spoolie and blend the front part and blend it up. Lashes! Lashes took me a while to master. They really did. In the beginning, I had a few mistakes that I go back now and I can see, yeah, you should have done this a little bit differently, but it's part of the learning process. We all have to go through it. I just happen to do it on camera. So to demonstrate some of the mistakes that I made, I'm going to be using a pair of lashes from My Lash Line. These are in the style Unapologetic. I'll have them linked below for you if you're interested. I love these. The right way to do it, always measure the lash. And I have a complete beginner's guide for false eyelashes, by the way, so I won't go too in depth here. But you always want to make sure you're measuring your lash, custom fitting it to your eye shape. Herein lies the mistake that I always made in the beginning, unbeknownst to me. I wouldn't trim enough of lash off of the ends of them, and when you don't do that, it can make your eyes look much more droopy, much more tired, and so I would have a little bit of excess hanging off here that should have been cut off, wasn't, and it made my eyes drag down further. So I'm going to recreate that here for you. The other thing I did not do when it came to false eyelashes, and I already did this off camera, so I apologize for not showing it to you up close, is that I would curl the lash after I applied it. So you can see here, all I did was take my eyelash curler and I very gently pressed my lash into the false eyelash, and you can see the difference that it makes. It really helps to open your eyes. Whereas on this eye, I haven't done it. I didn't trim it to fit my natural eye shape, so it's got too much on the end here that's hanging off, and it makes my eye look a little bit heavier on this side as opposed to this side, which looks a lot more alive. Okay, so for the face, I did not apply concealer 7 years ago. I probably could get away with it much better back then than I can now, but it was just not something I did. So to show you the difference that makes, I'll apply my NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealer on this side. The other difference with the concealer that I figured out not too long ago, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, if that, is that I apply it now with my fingers and I don't apply as much. Whereas before, I did get into that mindset that I feel like a lot of people mistakenly have where, oh, if I apply more concealer, I'll get more coverage. But that's not really the case. You really want to look for a concealer that has high pigment and apply less, because it will decrease the amount of creasing that you have. If you experience any creasing at all, you'll get much greater coverage. You'll use less product. You'll be able to extend it over time. You won't be buying it as often, and it just looks better. Can't live without it now though, I tell you what. 7 years ago, I would use a fuller coverage foundation as opposed to a more skin-like foundation today. I was all about masking my face. I don't know why. I think I was going through some confidence issues back then and just trying to find myself. I really feel like that's the place where I was at. So I was trying to maybe be somebody that I wasn't and not really comfortable enough in my own skin. So a fuller coverage foundation that I would have loved to have had back then is the NYX Can't Stop, Won't Stop. I use this so infrequently that the pump is actually clogged. The thing about this foundation, very pigmented. You really don't need much. I mean, if you're going to use this, you really don't need much. But back then, I would have overused it. I mean, really overkill used it. So that's what I'm gonna do here. And when I used foundation on my face, I used a brush to blend it in. I never used a sponge. I actually did not like sponges. And then what do you know? 7 years later, that's all I use. So I'm using the Sedona Lace FB07 brush to blend this in. And there is such a difference that I can see now on my personal skin of using a brush as opposed to a sponge. And I don't really like brushes that much anymore for that reason. On the flip side, my favorite kind of foundations, as many of you know about me by now, are ones that are very skin-like. They don't provide huge coverage. It's a very light coverage. And the one that I love is the Bare Minerals Complexion Rescue. I also love, if you're looking for one from the drugstore that's similar to this, the NYX Bear With Me Tinted Skin Veil. That's another excellent one that I go between with the Bare Minerals one. But today I'm going to use the Bare Minerals one. And you really don't need much when you're applying this. It has great pigment to it, and it blends in so beautifully on the skin. And lately, all I really do is apply enough to conceal redness, unevenness in my skin tone, sallowness, And that's it. I mean, I'm not here to cake it on. I'm not here to give myself a mask. It's really just to even things out. It is amazing how we change, isn't it? I mean, you go back and if you could tell your younger self just one thing, I would just tell her, you're beautiful just the way you are. I own it. I mean, your skin is gorgeous. Don't try to cover it up. It's so pretty. Powder. Woo, powder. I loved a matte face. I did, and I was not ashamed of it, so I would heavily powder my face as much as I could. So I'm using the Covergirl Clean Matte Pressed Powder, and you know what? Actually, no, we're gonna skip the brush. I used a powder puff, no joke. I'm gonna go find one. I found one. That was my old MAC one. I haven't used this in... gosh, long time. But the way that I would do it is I would really pile the powder onto the puff, press it into the skin. So I was matte and my makeup didn't move. If you asked me if I used setting sprays, no, I didn't need to because I was doing this. Now I've gotten away from that a little bit more. Like I said, we change, we grow, we evolve, and I'm going to use this brush I was using before. I'm going to really tap it off. I'm just doing a light dusting on this side, enough to set my face, but not enough to where it looks cakey or as heavy as the side over here. And by doing a little bit lighter application with it, it gives the skin a more youthful, radiant glow, which I've come to appreciate more the older I get, as opposed to when I was younger. I just wanted everything to be completely flat looking. And then for my contour today, I'm going in with one from Milani. This is the Silky Matte Sunlight shade. On my before side, I would have applied it down here, right into the hollows of the cheeks, further than what I should, thinking that that's where it was supposed to go. I carry it a little bit higher now. So instead of going directly under that cheek line there, I tend to bring it up more right about there now. And I don't bring it all the way down to about here, because before I would really like drag it down towards the edge of my mouth, where now I keep it a little higher and focus it directly under the cheek bone. And then for my cheeks, I'm using this palette from Jouer. I'm going to take this blush right here. This is the Rose Gold Blush Duo. Back then, I would have taken this shade and simply gone all over my cheek area with it, with no real thought of placement, just randomly putting it on my face. I really just loved to, I loved blush and I loved applying it all over. As opposed to now, I've changed my brush. I use a fan brush now. This is thanks to Eve Pearl. I get asked about this brush all the time. It's her number 204 brush. When I met her back in 2016, I want to say, she's the one who introduced me to this brush and a different method of applying a blush, contour, etc. with the fan brush. And it ultimately just changed the entire way that I looked at blush and contour application. And it makes for such a smooth, beautiful application. And so I apply it now directly on the apples of the cheeks. And I tend to blend it more up towards the temple too. Now for my under eye area, I would usually always apply an eyeshadow on the lower lash line. The look wasn't complete until I did that. So I'm going to go back with Unbridled again, and I'll apply that on the lower lash line. And sometimes I still do this today, but I've gotten away from it because I feel like it makes my under eyes look heavy. And if I'm tired, I haven't slept, etc., it can really emphasize my dark circles too. So I tend to not apply anything on the lower lash line. That includes mascara, which I was huge about 7 years ago too. Always had to have mascara on my lower lashes, where now I don't do that anymore. And I feel like it makes my eyes look much more open. And I've mentioned this before in a video past, but I want to re-emphasize it here for those who may be seeing this for the first time, or you've never heard me talk about this before. When you add mascara to the lower lashes, if you already suffer with dark under eye circles, the mascara on the lashes can create a shadow on that area of your eye, further enhancing any under eye circles that you may be trying to conceal. So if you struggle with deep under eye circles, try not applying any mascara or nothing at all to the lower lash line to help de-emphasize that area specifically. And then for my lips, I don't really feel like anything has changed so much. I feel like after all my pregnancies, they've become a little more inflated. They haven't really gone down since I had A's, which is great. I don't want them to, but I don't really do anything differently as far as applying lipstick, filling them in. I feel like the colors that I use are still pretty much the same. I was more adventurous with color 7 years ago as opposed to now. I've gotten into this very comfortable color with MAC's Creme Cup. You can see I'm almost out of it. It is my most favorite color because it's pink. And I also love mixing this with Creme de Nude sometimes too, to get a very light pink, nude-ish kind of color. Creme de Nude by itself is way too light on me, but when I mix it in with this pink, it helps to make it more natural looking. The one thing that I did do back then that I still do every now and then, and we'll do it just for old time's sake, is apply a little bit of gloss to the center of the lips, and that would help to make them look a little bit fuller. So I'm using NYX's Butter Gloss in the shade Fortune Cookie, and I'm applying it right there and right there. It just goes to show you that time and experience will just naturally round you out and give you a much better appreciation from where you were to where you are. And this tutorial has definitely done that for me. I love Zabrena 7 years ago. I love her now. It's amazing to see the transformation that has happened in my skills, my application, the transformative power in my face. And I really hope that you found a blessing in this, whether it helps you improve upon things that you may be trying to work on, or whether you're just starting out and you don't want to make the same mistakes that I made and you don't want to wait 7 years to get to a place where you are confident in your makeup skills. So whatever the case may be, I hope that you found this helpful and you enjoyed spending this time with me. I truly enjoyed having you here, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Have a beautifully blessed day ahead.